I just wanted to tell you about a volunteering program in Israel, which is not very well known in Australia. But if you're over the age of 35 and you're a retired lawyer, as opposed to somebody who can do something useful, it's quite hard to find a volunteering opportunity in Israel. And so there are a lot of people in this room who are under 35, but please bear with me because you could have parents or aunts and uncles who may be interested in what I'm going to say. I want to talk about the Sarel program, which is the National Volunteers Program for assisting the IDF. This program, which started in 1982 during the First Lebanon War, now involves bringing about 6,000 volunteers a year to Israel from about 30 countries. Not everyone is Jewish, about 15 to 20% of them are Christians, and they all come with a tremendous love for Israel. Many of the volunteers you meet on this program have been coming every year for decades, and they all have really interesting stories to tell, particularly about what it was like during wartime. The volunteers all live and work on IDF bases. They get a uniform, but you don't get a gun. And the work you do is routine and unskilled, but it's often very responsible. If, for example, you might be packing medical equipment or servicing equipment or weaponry. My first experience in 2014 had me unpacking and cleaning and storing tools that had come from Operation Protective Edge, which just ended before my program began. Others in my program were servicing tank batteries and assault weapons. This time I was working at the major medical supply base for the Army. And just by way of background to this, in the Second Lebanon War, they had a problem. They expected the war to be very short, and as a result, they didn't send many medical supplies up to the front. And of course, the war went on for considerably longer than was expected, and there were a lot more casualties than was expected. And as a result of this, the Army had to completely change its processes as regards medical supplies, and so now there is a special process for keeping medical supplies up to date and ready to be pulled off the shelf immediately for operations or for the humanitarian operations that Israel gets involved in overseas. And this process of looking after the medical supplies is almost entirely based on these volunteers who come from overseas. So what's the program like? Well, firstly, it's very interesting socially, and you'll meet people from places and walks of life that you would not normally meet. Every morning at 7:45, there's a little parade of everybody in uniform and a ceremonial raising of the Israeli flag and singing of Hatikva. This is coordinated by the Madrakot, who are assigned to each group of volunteers. And when you consider what the Jewish condition was like 70 years ago, it is actually a very moving experience to find yourself in an army uniform participating in a little flag raising ceremony on an Israeli base like this. So then you work for about 7 hours with a break of an hour for lunch, and I have to say I found the food quite good. There's also a synagogue on each base, and all religious needs are catered for. And then in the evening, the IDF Madrakot run an educational program for about an hour. And these are interesting and entertaining. You might learn about the IDF, the structure, the ranks, the career progression. You might get a talk by a lone soldier. You hear about women's experiences in the IDF. You learn about the ethical dilemmas soldiers encounter in battle. One of the Hinuk sessions we had was learning army slang. And I learnt what a jobnik is, but I'm sorry to tell you that I've forgotten what the army slang for an arse licker is, but there is such a thing. But if the conditions are normal, the program runs tours for the volunteers and you get to go to places where you wouldn't normally go. They're a bit off the mainstream. And overall, you get a terrific feeling of having done something tactless for Israel. And if you consider how much the government saves by having all these overqualified, dedicated people working solidly over a year, it is actually a significant amount of money. Finally, the appreciation of the Israelis is absolutely palpable. The people on the bases are warm and friendly to you, and if you wear a Sarel t-shirt off the base, it's just amazing the reception you get when you go and buy an ice cream or you go and hail a taxi or do something like that. People know what Sarel is. So if you are interested, or if you know somebody who might be interested in spending some time in Israel doing this, you can do it for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or longer. I suggest you Google Sarel, make contact with the Australian coordinator of the program, and you won't be sorry. So if you've got any questions about it, please don't hesitate to come up and ask me. Thank you.